What's up guys, and welcome back to another episode of Pokemon Origins with me, TheOneIntegral. Today we are going to be covering the Gastly line, Gastly, Haunter and Gengar. As always guys, be sure to suggest some more Pokemon for future episodes down in the comment section. I'm going to cover one more Kanto line and then we're going to move on to Johto. So be sure to put some suggestions down for Johto and obviously Hoenn and the other regions too. But for now, let's have a look at Gastly and its evolution line. So Gastly. Its Japanese name is Gosu, or spelled Gos, just without the T on Ghost. It's the gas Pokemon and is a Ghost Poison type. It's number 92 in the National Pokedex and stands at 1.3 meters or 4 foot 3 inches and weighs 0.1 kilograms or 0.2 pounds, so a very light Pokemon there. Looking at its models from Generation 6, you can see the regular and shiny models. Shiny, instead of having a sort of pinky purpley cloud of gas around it, it has almost a bluey colour, and its main body has gone a dark, or sort of a lighter purple, or more vivid purple, whereas normal Gastly sort of has this really dark purple colour to it, which obviously we'll look more at in just a second. Gastly evolves into Haunter as you might expect, but this starts at level 25, so it's not too high level, but it is a bit. It's not like level 15 for example. You do have to train with Gastly a bit to get a Haunter. So as I mentioned, Gastly is basically a dark purple ball. It's a really dark purple colour. It's almost black, but it's not quite black. It is a purpley colour. It's surrounded by a slightly lighter, more pale purple gas that sort of goes around it and is in wisps and bits and comes off. It's basically a gas. We can assume it gives off this gas from the main body, ball, whatever you want to call it. On this main ball of a body, we have two large irisless eyes. So basically, just huge white eyes in sort of the form of a semicircle with just these two dots for the pupils. There's no iris in here at all, it's just completely white with these two pupils right in the centre, and they're very small as well. There are light pink-red lines around these eyes, as you can see sort of on the centre, just below them, and just to the side as well on the Sugimori, and also on the models as well. You can see these lines are there. What these are, maybe they're just sort of movement lines that are just added for effect. Maybe they're just sort of where Gastly actually can focus its eyes and move its eyes around on its body, so it's not just sort of a ball that's solid. This ball actually is sort of skin or whatever you want to call it, and actually compresses and whatnot. Who knows? And Gastly has two small teeth that poke out either end of its mouth. This is a very small mouth at the bottom of the ball, but these two small teeth just poke out and make it look a bit more sort of more Gastly, for example. And we can also see in some shots from the anime that Gastly can use the gas around it to actually form hands or arms of some description, because it's shown riding a swing, so it can control this gas. This gas isn't just given off and goes, it actually has some sort of influence over this gas and can do different things with it. So that sort of leads it to more, rather than just its main body being the main body and that's it just gives off the gas. The gas is actually part of Gastly's body as well, and it can actually mould this and move it however it wants. So this whole thing, Gastly and its gas, it's all one Pokemon. It's a gaseous Pokemon, so the gas belongs to it. It can control it basically. Looking at some Pokedex entries for Gastly, we're told that 95% of its body is made of gases, and we can assume that this remaining 5% is possibly the teeth, or just sort of a component of the main bit of its main ball body, just to hold it together, I guess. And Gastly actually attacks its prey by enveloping it in this gas, so again, it has control over this gas. It could just sort of pull it around the opponents and just suffocate them in the gas, or poison them, because as we also find out from the Pokedex entries, Gastly's gas is poisonous, hence the Ghost Poison. So again, that's going to help you take out enemies if you're enveloping them with a poison gas. Then, we're told it can also defeat large foes, including an Indian elephant. This is one of the only times that sort of a real-life creature is actually mentioned in the Pokedex entry, or anywhere, or a specific creature at least, anywhere in the Pokemon universe, an Indian elephant. But Gastly can defeat one of these, and that's not a tiny thing, that's a huge thing. So it can certainly, take down some pretty hefty things. As with most Pokemon, to be honest, Pokemon are gonna, they're gonna beat animals at any time. But, however, this Gastly's body can be blown away by the wind. So while Gastly has control over it, it's not necessarily joined to it. Okay, so maybe if it's only near it, it can be controlled. Whereas wind, maybe the wind blowing it, maybe it just sort of makes it recede inside Gastly, inside its body possibly, and Gastly just pulls it in so it doesn't get blown away completely. Or maybe it does indeed get blown away and Gastly just has to produce more of this gas to, I guess, make itself. Who knows? We're told in strong winds and such, Gastly will actually cluster under houses or under the lips of houses. You know, when you get the little thing that comes across the houses, Gastly will cluster together to escape the wind and obviously, you know, to stay whole basically. So they'll cluster together in these groups of balls, and you know, the gas is going to help each other out because, you know, one Gastly is pretty exposed to the wind, whereas a group of them aren't going to do as badly. So Gastly is a group Pokemon, maybe, who knows. So what is Gastly based on? And that's the reason you're here in this video. What's it based on? Well, it's probably based on cartoon ghosts, mainly because it has sort of this gassy appearance. It actually floats like most ghosts do. Most cartoon ghosts, I should say, and it has these two big white eyes, which, you know, are pretty common on big sort of cartoony, funny ghosts. You know, they haven't got small natural eyes. They actually have these big eyes, maybe with big pupils sometimes. But obviously, Gastly doesn't have this. But possibly, most likely, cartoon ghosts. Another possibility for Gastly, at least, is the Will-o'-the-Wisp, which is a ghost light that's sometimes seen by travellers at night, and this is basically in a form of floating fire, some sort of fireball that's just floating in the air, some light floating in the air. And as you know, as you can see by Gastly, it's gas. You know, it looks exactly like a ball of fire almost. If you gave it some sort of a light to it and just placed it in the forest, it would look very good in that sense. Another possible basis for it is the Yukai Sogenbi from Japan, which is a sort of a legend or a myth. Or it was a decapitated head of a monk consumed by fire, doomed to roam the earth until the end, possibly, who knows. But again, this is because Gastly, basically, it's a ball. It's just a head that's floating with this almost fire-like gas around it. So again, obviously from Japan, Pokemon is made in Japan, so it's very likely that also had some sort of influence. And as well, there's the poison typing for Gastly, as we've already been told. You know, Gastly's gas is poisonous. It's a clear reference to the gas pollution in the world we have now, especially in Japan again, where smog is a huge problem. Gastly's poisonous gas is definitely a reference to gas pollution there. So then the naming for Gastly, its Japanese name Gos, which is basically just from ghost. It's ghost without the T, that's how it's spelled, and it's pretty much said the same way, Gos. So yeah, that's it. Gastly is a combination of gas, as we've mentioned already. Gas has been said loads of time in this video, and ghastly, which means sort of just nasty or scary. It's a ghastly thing. Gas and ghastly. It's basically ghastly without the H, but obviously it has gas at the start. Makes sense. Now, one of the other names for Gastly, which is Nebulak, or a similar sort of pronunciation in German, is a combination of Nebel, Nebula, and Ak. Nebel meaning fog or mist, which again is sort of a reference to the gas or smog in Japan City, or Japanese cities rather. Nebula is referring to a nebula in space, in the sky, if you guys know what nebulas are. Sort of like a collection of stars and dust and gas, which sort of makes a pretty thing, which is similar to, again, to Gastly, gas, dust, etc. And then Ak means oh. So possibly how you get scared when you're like, oh, it's a scary thing, possibly. So again, maybe it's just reference to how scary Gastly is to see as, oh, hi, didn't see you there, sort of thing. Who knows? But that's generally the German name there, which I just thought I'd pick up on because it has nebula in it, and you guys know how much I love my science. Yes! So, last up for Gastly, if we take a look at its size. Now, even though it weighs hardly anything, it's actually 1.3 meters or 4 foot 3 inches tall, and I took this to be pretty much the size of almost its ball, but maybe sort of more of it as well, because I can't quite be sure. It could be just a ball, it could be all the gas contained, who knows. So this is what I got here. You can see it's a pretty big Pokemon. Maybe I've oversized it just a bit, but in the anime it is almost the size as well. So yeah, you don't want to mess with a Gastly. It's actually a pretty big Pokemon. We'll see how it compares to Haunter and Gengar as we get along now. We'll actually see it get smaller basically, rather than getting bigger like most evolution chains. But obviously we'll look at that as we get onto the episode. But yeah, that's it for Gastly's size, and that's basically it for Gastly as well. So if we move on to look at Gastly's evolution, we are going to look at Haunter. So Haunter, it's number 93 in the National Pokedex, coming just after Gastly, and the Japanese name for Haunter is Gosto, or spelt ghost, so it's basically gained a T. It's also the Ghastly Pokemon, and is again a ghost poison type. It stands at 1.6 meters or 5 foot 3 inches, and weighs exactly the same as Gastly at 0.1 kilograms or 0.2 pounds. So it's gotten slightly bigger, but it's the same size, same weight rather. So again, gas doesn't weigh much, hence why it's so light. Looking at the regular and shiny models from Generation 6 for Haunter, you can see Shiny Haunter isn't much different to normal Haunter, apart from the fact it's got a blue tongue. That's basically it. There's a slight change in its colouring for the body, but it's very, very, very slight. And the only real change is in the mouth there. It's blue, basically. So as I mentioned, Gastly will evolve into Haunter starting level 25. To evolve your Haunter into a Gengar, however, you need to trade it. So it's one of the first trade evolutions introduced in Pokemon, and that's really what made it the game it is today. So Haunter, it has a gas-like body, very similar to Gastly. However, this one seems to be, I say more wispy hair, but it's not exactly the way I could put my thoughts into it. It's more defined, I guess. Whereas Gastly just has this gas going around it in the ball with the gas surrounding it. Haunter just sort of has this gas is just, it's part of its body. It's more contained now, okay? It's going to stick to it more. It's not going to escape. As Haunter will move, I guess its tail, I guess you could say, the bottom bit of its gas is going to move because obviously it's gas. It's still going to follow it, whereas it's not going to float away and whatnot. Okay, it's more structured, this gas. It also has two clawed floating hands, which are again going to be made out of gas, and obviously it can control these because they move them around and they use it to grab stuff. So its gas is more compressed, it's more structured, it can actually hold stuff. It's not going to just slip through like Gastly's gas. Its eyes have actually shrunk slightly from what they were as Gastly, and then they're sort of almost more normal, I guess, but still a bit big. Again, with no irises and just the sort of the slit pupils, the straight lines for its pupils. Its mouth has actually grown in size, whereas Gastly just had sort of this little mouth here. Haunter has this big gaping mouth almost, and obviously because it's gas, it can probably open this mouth as big as it wants, as long as it sort of stays together, I guess. Get the idea. But its teeth are now actually part of the body. Its teeth are now actually made out of gas, or made out of this hard gas, I'm going to say. Whereas Gastly actually had two proper white teeth. Haunter has its teeth just part of it. It's just made part of the body. So maybe that's just something to think about there. Maybe Haunter has actually gotten a bit heavier, but because it's lost these teeth, it gets a bit lighter because of that and stays the same weight. Who knows? So, looking at Pokedex entries for Haunter, much like we did for Gastly, we're told that it uses its tongue to lick victims, because one of the moves that the Gastly line can learn very early on is lick. But by doing this, it actually steals their life away, or their life force away, so you don't want to get licked by a Haunter. As well as this, the touch of a Haunter can cause endless shuddering, so as well as stealing your life away, you're also going to have endless shuddering, and you won't be able to stop shuddering, so definitely not a good idea to mess with a Haunter, or any of this line indeed. We're told that Haunter lurks in the darkness, waiting, and it also likes to tap shoulders with its ghostly hands. So if someone's just walking along in the dark, it will tap your shoulder, make you shudder a bit, and then it will just disappear. And it's just a prankster, really. We're also told that Haunter can slip through solid walls. Being gas, obviously it's not technically possible physically, but maybe it has some sort of property where it can actually maybe put its gas through the tiniest holes and just feed it through slowly and remake itself on the other side. Who knows? But because it can slip through these solid walls, it was said to be from another dimension. Because, that's what people maybe think, oh my god, it can go through walls. It must be supernatural sort of thing. Who knows? But this was only mentioned, I think, in Generation 1 Pokedex entries. It's never been mentioned again, so it's possibly not canon anymore because a lot of the entries were changed. There was stuff about, when Pokemon were born, whereas they're not born, they're hatched from eggs sort of thing. So maybe they changed it, maybe they didn't want Haunter to be from another generation, but it's certainly a possibility, maybe because we know there are several dimensions in Pokemon. So it's possible they could maybe come from the same dimension as Unknown or something along those lines. Don't, just speculation, guys. So, much like Gastly, again, it's based on cartoon ghosts because the hands, some ghosts have hands that float away from their body, and it's sort of, it's a bit more, looks a tiny bit more like your normal cartoon ghosts, just in terms of shape, because there aren't typically any ghosts that are just a solid ball. Who knows? But it may also be inspired by the dealer from Filipino mythology. This was a spirit that can pass through walls, much as we heard Haunter can pass through walls, and it can lick certain humans to death. As we've just been mentioning, in the Pokedex, Haunter can lick its victims, and this steals their life force. If you've got no life force left, you're going to die, so who knows? But yes, the dealer is possibly, is most likely, direct inspiration for Haunter there. Then looking at Haunter's naming, the Japanese name Gosto, or Ghost, is just Ghost. Nothing much more needs to be said apart from that. The English name Haunter is derived from to haunt, which ghosts do because they haunt people, so Haunter. It's a haunter, it haunts people. But it may also be a corruption of Hunter. Hunter has just got just add the A in there, you got Haunter. So possibly that's there, possibly, who knows. Because, Haunter, it slips in the shadows and then it'll lick prey when it comes out of the shadows and the darkness and whatnot. So again, possibly, maybe it's just maybe an add-on there, or maybe it's a combination of haunt and hunter. Who knows? Then looking at the German name again, we have Apollo, which is a combination of Alptrom and possibly Apollo. Alptrom means nightmare, so that makes a lot of sense since this is a ghost type Pokemon, and Apollo is the name of the space program, Apollo on the moon and everything, so possibly talking about other dimensions in terms of that, dimensions, space, might be a link there, or might be the fact that in space everything is dark, there is nothing, so maybe it would be Haunter's perfect place, maybe it lives on the dark side of the moon, who knows. So Apollo rather is possibly an addition there, because just the start of Alptrom and then Apollo would be the end of it, but who knows, it's a possibility, I'm not quite sure. Finally, for Haunter, if we take a quick look at its size, it's actually gotten slightly bigger from Gastly. I did say it gets smaller, but we'll see in the end when we get to Gengar. But you can see it's now 1.6 meters or 5 foot 3 inches, and it's a pretty big Pokemon, okay? I styled it looking at just sort of the main body here. I sort of ignored the hands because they're additions to the body. I looked at the main body here, the main circle of the body, and saw that when it goes from Gastly to Haunter, it just sort of gets a bit bigger, and the gas around it sort of settles in its hands, I'm assuming. But it's still pretty big. It's exactly the same size as Ash now. I did have to make some adjustments so it looked a bit nicer, but Haunter is still pretty huge. Imagine the size of that tongue. You don't want to get licked by that tongue, guys. You do not want to get licked by that tongue. But that's it for Haunter's size, and of course that's it for Haunter as well. If we take a quick look at the last Pokemon for today, which is going to be Gengar. So Gengar, it's number 94 in the National Pokedex, coming after Haunter obviously, and its Japanese name is Gengar, or Gengar. It's pretty much said exactly the same way except spelled with an A. It's the Shadow Pokemon now, and again it's a Ghost Poison type. It stands at 1.5 meters or 4 foot 11 inches and weighs 40.5 kilograms or 89.3 pounds. Looking at the models from Generation 6, you can see the regular and shiny models, there is a slight difference between this. You can see shiny model has a sort of a paler purple, a darker pale purple colour than the normal Gengar, but there's not a huge change. It's very similar to Haunter, but there is a bit more of a change. Its eyes are maybe a slightly different shade of red, but not very much by very much at all. It's basically the same apart from the skin colour. So, Gengar. Gengar has more of a solid body, but still with a few gas-like properties. It's very similar to Haunter, except it's maybe gotten even a bit more sort of, solid, but it can still sort of expand its body, move its body around, much as if it was sort of liquidy gas. So it has got some gas-like properties still, just not as many as Gastly and Haunter. It has a roundish main body, almost like a sort of just an oval or a circle, or some sort of sphere, with small, smooth limbs coming out. You can see, when I say smoothed, I mean there's no big sort of sharp angles almost. Its hands and its fingers and its toes, they're sort of just very smooth and sleek, I guess. There's nothing too much about it. It could probably even move its fingers around if it wanted to. Gengar also has some spikes across its back and on its sort of, I guess, its head, as hair almost, including 2 large, almost ear-like spikes. These could be ears, they might not be, we don't really know. Its eyes have now turned a pale red colour, so instead of being white like previous evolutions, they're now a pale red colour and still have these sort of almost slit-like pupils there. Its teeth are once again white and I guess actually there, and they form a large smile right across its body, so it's a very large smile. So its mouth has just gotten bigger as it's evolved, and it's very huge now, it almost goes right across its body, so it's a bit of a smiler there. Looking at some Pokedex entries for Gengar, being the Shadow Pokemon, it mimics people's shadows, and it can steal your shadow, it can move around in shadows, everything to do with shadows Gengar can do. It also steals heat from its surroundings, so if Gengar's around, it might be a bit cooler, might be a bit colder, and it can actually reduce the temperature by up to 10 degrees Fahrenheit, which is a fair change, to be honest. Gengar also takes delight in casting curses upon people or stealing their life force like Haunter does. So Gengar isn't really the nicest Pokemon. It's a bit of a prankster again, likes to steal your shadow, mess around with you, cast curses on you, which isn't particularly nice, but why not? We'll let him go for it, and also steals the life force. Whether it does this by licking or not, who knows, but it may well do. Gengar still has a pretty big tongue, we see it every now and again. So the origin for Gengar, it's based again on cartoon ghosts, not so much as Haunter and Gastly as anymore really, because it's actually got a full body now, but there are some ghostly aspects still there from cartoons. And there are actually possible inspiration from cats, or in particular the Cheshire Cat. Now cats often, they stalk alleyways and everything, so they stalk in the shadows, which is what Gengar does. It also has maybe a few body-like features that look like a cat, for example these two big ears that we haven't seen on its previous evolutions really, but these two big ears, they do come out there. But what really is the inspiration for it is the Cheshire Cat. The original saying for this was grinning like a Cheshire Cat, which was favoured by people in England in the county of Cheshire. This became a character in Alice in Wonderland. If I show you some screenshots here, you can see it has a really big grin, much like Gengar. So Gengar is grinning like a Cheshire Cat, so possibly that's where that inspiration came from there, because the character in Alice in Wonderland isn't particularly nice, or they like to prank, they like to play tricks, or I should say but it's not exactly the nicest of entities as well. Shadows are often a representation of a malevolent entity, especially in films. You'll see, scary films, you'll see a big maybe a big mass of black in a corner or somewhere moving around a room. This often represents sort of a malevolent entity, some sort of ghost or demon or whatever. So Gengar being the shadow Pokemon is sort of a big hint there. And also, if you maybe look at some people when you're walking down the street, for example, your shadow will get thrown. And sometimes you get these random these spikes coming out of it, and it'll look really cool. Sort of looks like how Gengar looks sometimes, with its spikes on its back. If you throw your shadow out, it does look a bit like that as well. So possibly all these things have inspired Gengar's design there. Now the naming for Gengar. First up we have the Japanese name Gengar, which is a shortening of Doppelganger. Doppelganger is basically a copy of you, okay? So if you made a copy of yourself, but they weren't real, so they were just sort of a fake copy, okay, a doppelganger, or maybe someone that looks exactly the same as you. They are your doppelganger. If you've seen How I Met Your Mother, there's the doppelgangers of the crew. I'm just going off on a sort of here. Or in Doctor Who, there is a scene in one of the series, or a few episodes in one of the series, where there are gangers and they're copies of people basically. So doppelganger is a copy of person, which makes sense because they steal people's shadows. So Gengar again, very links there. However, this Japanese character you can see here can also be read as Gen, and is used in Phantom or Illusion. So this is used in some words, so Gengar, links in there. Again, obviously the English name, similarly, it comes from doppelganger, but there's also the Danish word, which applies to both of these, the Japanese name and the English name, which is Genganger, which is a term for ghost in Danish. So basically, take out the Gan, we'll take out we'll take the A, put it at the end, Gengar, very similar guys. So again, that's another inspiration for the name here. And obviously, Genganger may have come from Ganger, and also Gen anyway. Then, one last name here. Instead of looking at the German this time, we're looking at the French. We have ectoplasma, which is a combination of ectoplasm and plasma. Ectoplasm being some sort of saying ghosts leave behind this trail of ectoplasm, or this I guess spit. I don't want to be too crude about it, but you guys get the idea. And plasma is just a term in science, a term in physics, which is sort of stuff that can move about freely almost. I don't want to go too much into it, but plasma could be related to how the Gastly line can just sort of move around, much like gas. Gas can become plasma as well if you heat it up high enough, so that's very, very similar, very related there. So that's the names there for Gengar. Then if we take a look at Gengar's size finally, as I said, it does get a bit smaller. So what we had previously with Gastly's huge body floating in the air, as well as Haunter's, we now have Gengar almost standing on the ground like a normal Pokemon. It's now 1.5 meters, 4 foot 11 inches, so it's gotten shorter by 0.1 meters from the Haunter. I think it's still slightly bigger than Gastly in terms of height, but it does look a bit smaller. But yeah, in terms of height, it's just a bit shorter than Ash, a fair bit shorter than myself as well, but I definitely wouldn't want to mess with Gengar anyway, especially that huge grin, that huge creepy smile almost. It creeps you out if you look at it too long, I'll be honest, it does creep you out. But that's Gengar. Now, I'm sure you guys know that Gengar actually has a Mega Evolution, and we're going to start looking at that. So, introducing Mega Gengar. So, Mega Gengar. It keeps the same typing, being a Ghost Poison type, and in terms of height it actually gets smaller again, going down to 1.4 meters or 4 foot 7 inches, and the weight, it actually gets, well, it actually doesn't get at all, it stays the same at 40.5 kilograms or 89.3 pounds. Looking at the model from Generation 6, you can see the changes when Gengar Mega evolves are pretty big. In terms of its shiny, whereas Gengar's normal shiny, there was no change almost at all. We have a very white shiny hair. Shiny Mega Gengar, there we are, goes almost a pure white colour. Its eyes become grey, and this middle eye in the front of its head stays the same, but I'm happy with the changes on Mega Gengar, or shiny Mega Gengar anyway. As you might expect, Gengar will evolve into Mega Gengar when the Gengarite is used with it. Mega Gengar's body has sunk into the ground. It actually has hands and legs that we just don't see, but they're just sunk into the ground. And it's more hunched over. Its hands have fused into the ground, whereas previously it was fully stood up. If it was just sinking into the ground anyway, we'd still see its arms, whereas it's actually become more hunched over and just in the ground basically. Doing this means that the lower half of its body is now almost a dark pinky colour, dark pinky red colour. And it's just sort of almost like a fire has been lit in the ground in the bottom of Gengar. It's just sort of burning its way up into its main body. Spikes now cover its entire body, whereas normal Gengar just had some spikes on its top of its back. Mega Gengar has spikes over the whole body, on its arms, down its back, on its almost like a tail sort of thing it has now, where it's in the ground, but spikes everywhere, including again these two main spikes that almost look like ears. And as I mentioned just now, it's now gained a third yellow eye on its forehead, which is an all-seeing eye. There are talks about if someone has a third eye, it's an all-seeing eye or something along those lines, which makes sense for Gengar as well. Its normal eyes, you can see the pupils aren't just single slits now. There are actually sort of, maybe it actually has irises, which just happen to be the same colour as its normal eyes. But again, they have changed a bit. And its creepy smile stays all the same. Maybe it actually gets a bit more turned up. It's almost curled upwards a bit more than normal Gengar's does. And finally, if we take a look at Mega Gengar's size being shorter, I've measured it from sort of where it sinks into the ground up to the top of its head, which is 1.4 meters. However, its spikes and its ear spikes things do actually make it look more bigger. It is technically bigger than me and Ash with the ear spikes. But as you can see there, Mega Gengar a bit bigger than normal Gengar, just because of how it's spread out and it's sort of sunk into the ground, which is the sinking into the ground has made it lose its height, but it's actually sunk more than 0.1 meters, so it's a bit bigger anyway. But there you can see, Mega Gengar, not someone you want to mess with because of how more powerful it is in the first place. That in fact, it can lick you and steal your life force. It can lay curses on you. Gengar is certainly not a Pokemon you want to mess with, especially when it's in its Mega form, because it can probably do even more nasty things there. But guys, that is going to be it for this episode of Pokemon Origins. If you enjoyed the episode, please be sure to hit the like button down below and suggest some more Pokemon for me to cover in the future. There's one more Kanto and then we're on to Johto, guys, so be sure to look forward to that. But for now, this is it for me for today. I'll be seeing you next time. Thank you for watching. Goodbye, my friends.